The gas station attendant paid for an elderly man's gas and was fired by the manager. A few hours later, she can't believe who knocked on her door. The sun was peeking over the horizon, tinting the sky with shades of orange and pink as Maria arrived at the gas station. She proudly wore the station's red uniform, and even though she had only been there for 3 months, she already felt like she belonged. The work as a gas station attendant was simple, but Maria always made sure to perform her tasks with the utmost dedication and respect. Since she was a child, her parents had taught her that it didn't matter how big or complex a task was. What truly mattered was the honesty and dignity with which the work was done. The gas station where Maria worked was located on a busy corner of the city, with a constant flow of cars coming and going all day. The smell of fuel, mixed with the scent of nearby trees, created a characteristic environment that Maria was starting to associate with her new home. The sound of engines, the laughter of customers, and casual conversations with co-workers were all part of her daily routine. Cecilia, a 40-year-old woman, had been working at the station for years and knew all the tricks of the trade. She always had a sarcastic comment or a cynical observation about life. To her, the world was a harsh and unjust place, with no room for illusions of kindness or honesty. "Maria, girl, you're too naive," Cecilia often said. "This business of being honest leads nowhere. The world will teach you that sooner or later." Daniel, the manager, was a man nearing 50 with vast life experience. He had a serious and imposing demeanor, but wasn't cruel, just pragmatic. He shared Cecilia's view that the world was no place for the weak or idealistic. "Maria," he would say, "you need to be smarter. You can't let your heart guide your decisions. People aren't as good as you think." Maria heard these words, but never allowed the bitterness of others to contaminate her values. She was proud of who she was and the lessons her parents had taught her. She firmly believed that kindness and honesty were virtues that should be preserved regardless of the circumstances. That day, the gas station was bustling. Cars were coming in and out at a frantic pace, and Maria was busy fueling vehicles, cleaning windshields, and accepting payments. Amidst the hustle, an old but well-maintained car pulled up beside one of the pumps. Maria approached and saw that the driver was an elderly man dressed in pajamas. The scene was unusual, but Maria, always professional, greeted him with a smile. "What can I do for you today?" she asked gently. "Please, just put in a little gasoline," the man replied in a tired but polite voice. Maria did as he asked, filling the tank with the minimum amount of fuel as requested. When she was done, the man started the car and, with a slight nod, drove off without saying a word and without paying. Maria stood still for a few seconds, surprised by what had just happened. The shock was followed by a wave of concern. She was still on probation, and any mistake could cost her the job. Without hesitation, Maria took out her wallet and pulled out the money to cover the cost of the fuel. She knew it was the right thing to do, even if it meant a personal sacrifice. However, as she handed the money over at the register, Cecilia, who had been watching from afar, let out an ironic laugh. "I warned you, Maria," Cecilia said with a superior tone. "This silly honesty of yours will never get you anywhere. You only lose by helping others. The world is not a fairy tale." As Cecilia laughed, the loud echoes of her laughter filled the station, and Daniel, the manager, came out of his office, intrigued by what was happening. He walked over to where Maria and Cecilia were, his expression serious and inquisitive. "What's going on here?" Daniel asked, his deep voice cutting through the air. Before Maria could explain, Cecilia, with a malicious smile, had already jumped in. "Oh, Daniel, you won't believe this. Our dear Maria here just paid for a customer's fuel after they drove off without paying. She thought she could be the hero of the day, but look, she only hurt herself." Daniel looked at Maria with an expression difficult to decipher. He sighed deeply before speaking. "Maria, I understand that you wanted to do what you thought was right, but this can't happen again. You need to understand that the world doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, I can't let this slide. I'm going to have to let you go." Daniel's words fell on Maria like a crushing weight. She felt her world collapse at that moment. She needed that job to support herself, and the thought of losing everything over an act of kindness seemed cruel. However, Maria knew there was no going back. What was done was done. She gathered her belongings in silence, ignoring the looks from Cecilia and Daniel, and left the station with a heavy heart, uncertain of what the future held for her. The sky was tinged with grey as Maria walked the streets toward her home, the recent firing still fresh in her mind, weighing on her heart like a stone. The cold afternoon wind seemed to echo her sadness, cutting through her skin and making her huddle into her coat. With each step, the feeling of desolation deepened, and she wondered how she had ended up in this situation. Maria had grown up in a humble family, but had always been taught to hold her head high, no matter how difficult life became. Her parents, hard-working and dedicated, were simple people with unshakable morals. They believed that honesty was the foundation of a dignified life, and Maria had absorbed these values like a sponge since childhood. Her mother always said, "Never let the world make you forget who you are, Maria. Be honest, be kind, because in the end, that's what really matters." These words echoed in Maria's mind as she tried to process the events of the day. The reality of her situation was harsh. Without a job, how would she pay the bills? How would she support herself? These questions swirled in her head, creating a whirlwind of uncertainty. She felt lost, as if the ground had been pulled out from under her feet. When Maria finally arrived home, a small, modest brick house, she felt a twinge of relief. The familiarity of the environment brought some comfort, but the sadness still hung in the air. She sat at the kitchen table, observing the silence around her. The house, which had often been a cozy refuge, now seemed empty and cold. As Maria was lost in thought, she heard a faint sound coming from outside the door. Curious, she got up and opened the door to find the source of the noise. That's when she saw, huddled in the corner of the entrance, a small puppy. He was thin, with dirty and matted fur, and his big, sad eyes looked at Maria with a mix of fear and hope. Maria's heart tightened at the sight of that little creature, so defenseless. She knew what it was like to feel alone and helpless, and couldn't simply ignore the animal. "You must be hungry, poor thing," she said softly, kneeling to pet the puppy. The dog responded with a slight wag of its tail, as if understanding that he was now safe. Maria picked him up in her arms and brought him inside, determined to care for him despite all her own difficulties. She filled a bowl with water and improvised a meal for the little dog with what she had in the fridge. While the puppy ate voraciously, Maria couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. It was a simple gesture, but caring for the animal gave her a sense of purpose, even if just for a brief moment. She decided to name the dog Max. The name seemed strong, a little irony for such a fragile puppy. After feeding him, she gave him a bath, washing away all the dirt that had accumulated on his white fur. The process was time-consuming, but Maria did it with patience and care. When she finished, Max looked like a new dog, with clean and soft fur. He followed Maria around the house, not wanting to leave his new protector's side. As night approached, Maria sat on the sofa in the small living room, with Max lying beside her, finally asleep after his meal. She gently stroked the puppy, trying to find some solace in the animal's company. As bleak as the situation seemed, something inside her still believed that the world wasn't entirely cruel. There was kindness, even in small actions, and that was something she refused to abandon. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell broke the silence of the house, startling Maria. She wasn't expecting any visitors, and for a moment, she thought of ignoring the sound. But the persistent ringing made her get up and go to the door. When she opened it, she was faced with a young man, elegant, with a serious appearance but a gentle smile. Maria continued to stare at the man at her door, perplexed. He was young, elegant, and had a presence that exuded confidence, something that contrasted with the simple environment in which she lived. For a moment, the silence between them was filled only by the light sound of the wind outside. Finally, the man broke the silence. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice calm and polite. Maria hesitated for a moment, but something about the way he spoke made her feel there was no danger. She nodded and opened the door a little wider, allowing him to enter. Max, still lying on the sofa, raised his head and watched the stranger curiously, but soon lay down again, feeling safe in Maria's presence. "My name is Victor," the man said as he settled into one of the chairs in Maria's small living room. "I believe you don't know me, but I know you, Maria." Maria stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. "You know me? How so?" she asked, a mix of surprise and confusion in her voice. Victor took a deep breath before responding. "I'm the owner of the gas station where you worked, and I'm here because what happened today concerns me more than you might imagine." Maria felt a chill run down her spine as she heard those words. Her mind started racing, trying to figure out what this meant. "What do you mean by that?" Victor, noticing the tension in Maria's voice, relaxed his posture a bit and smiled gently. "I saw what happened today, Maria, but before coming here, I needed to see it with my own eyes to understand the situation better." Victor then began to explain how he had been alerted by Daniel, the station manager. "Right after the incident, Daniel called me concerned. He told me that a customer had driven off without paying and that you, Maria, had decided to pay out of your own pocket. I knew something more was going on, so I went to the station immediately." Victor continued, explaining that upon arriving at the station, Daniel took him to the security room. Together, they reviewed the camera footage to try to identify the customer who had driven off without paying. "When I saw the footage, I immediately recognized the car," Victor said, his voice laden with conflicting emotions. "It was my father's car." Maria was shocked to hear that. "Your father?" she repeated, almost in disbelief. "But why would he—" "My father has Alzheimer's," Victor interrupted gently. "In recent years, the disease has worsened, and he has more and more frequent memory lapses. Sometimes he remembers details from the past, but most of the time, he forgets simple things like where he is or what he was doing." Maria felt a tightness in her chest upon hearing that. Suddenly, everything made sense. The man's appearance, his confusion, the way he left without paying. It wasn't malice or dishonesty. It was the disease speaking for him. Victor continued to explain how he was surprised and worried when he recognized his father in the footage. "As soon as I saw the footage, I knew I needed to make things right. It was a delicate situation, and I knew my father didn't do it out of malice, but because of his condition. And that's when Daniel told me what you did, Maria." "I'm so sorry," Maria said, genuine empathy in her voice. "I didn't know." Victor nodded, seeing the sincerity in Maria's eyes. "I know you didn't, Maria, and that's why I'm here. I want to thank you for your generosity and integrity. You didn't have to pay for him, but you did anyway, because you believed it was the right thing to do." Maria remained silent, processing everything. She felt relieved to know that what happened wasn't anyone's fault, but she also worried about the implications this could have for the future. "And Daniel, he fired me because of this." Victor sighed. "I know. Daniel called me right after to explain what had happened, and I understood the situation. He did what he thought was best to protect the business, but honestly, I think he was too harsh with you." Maria nodded, silently agreeing. "I just wanted to do the right thing. I didn't want to cause problems." Victor smiled slightly. "And that's why I'm here. Maria, you demonstrated a rare quality today. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. I need someone like you, someone I can trust to take care of the station, especially considering my father's condition." Maria's eyes widened in surprise at what Victor was suggesting. "Are you saying that—" "I want you to be the new manager of the station," Victor said bluntly. "I believe you have the integrity and dedication needed for the job. I know it's a big responsibility, but I trust that you can handle it." Maria was speechless. The offer was tempting, but also frightening. She had just been fired, and now she was being offered an even higher position. I don't know what to say." "I know it's a difficult decision," Victor said, sensing Maria's hesitation. "You can think about it, but I want you to know that I truly believe you're the right person for this. And as for Daniel, don't worry. I'm going to relocate him to another station we're opening soon. He has experience, but sometimes he needs to be reminded that people come before numbers." Maria looked at Victor, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She knew this was a unique opportunity, but at the same time, she was concerned about the responsibility and Daniel's fate. However, the kindness and trust that Victor showed gave her a bit of courage. "I accept," she finally said with a shy smile, "but I hope I can live up to your trust." Victor smiled, visibly pleased. "I'm sure you will, Maria. I'm sure you will." As Victor said goodbye, Maria felt a new wave of hope wash over her heart. The day that had started with so much sadness and uncertainty now ended with the promise of a new beginning. And with Max sleeping peacefully by her side, she knew that despite all the difficulties, there was still goodness in the world, and that she had somehow found her way back to it. Morning arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal and hope. Maria was up at dawn, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. Today was her first day as the gas station manager, a role she had never imagined taking on so soon in her life. As she prepared to leave, Maria looked at Max, who was sleeping peacefully in the bed she had improvised in the corner of the living room. The puppy's presence gave her some comfort, a reminder that despite the uncertainties, there were reasons to believe in better days. When she arrived at the station, the environment seemed the same as always, but Maria knew that her perspective had completely changed. As a manager, everything that happened there was now her responsibility. This meant she needed to be attentive to every detail, from fuel supply to the well-being of her co-workers. As she walked through the lot, greeting the attendants and checking the pumps, she felt the curious and perhaps skeptical looks from some of her colleagues. Cecilia was by the fuel pump, preparing to serve a customer. When she saw Maria, she let out a slight smile, but Maria could sense the irony behind the gesture. "So now you're the boss, huh?" Cecilia commented with the same cynical air she always adopted. "Let's see how long you can keep all this honesty." Maria took a deep breath, recognizing the challenge implied in Cecilia's words. She knew that earning everyone's respect wouldn't be easy, especially since some, like Cecilia, still saw the world as a place where kindness and honesty were weaknesses. "I won't change who I am," Maria responded calmly. "I believe we can do the right job without having to give up our values." Cecilia shrugged, as if to say she'd heard it all before, and went back to work. Maria knew she needed to do more than just talk to prove her competence. It was time to show through actions that her leadership would bring something positive to everyone there. The first days were challenging. Maria quickly discovered that being a manager involved much more than simply delegating tasks. She had to deal with suppliers, resolve technical problems, and, above all, maintain the team's morale. Each day brought a new obstacle, but Maria faced each one with the same determination that had brought her there. Victor, for his part, made a point of visiting the station regularly. Initially, Maria thought he was just monitoring her performance, but she soon realized there was more to his visits. They began spending more time together, talking not just about work, but also about their lives. Victor shared stories from his childhood, talking about his father before Alzheimer's took hold, and Maria, in turn, shared about her family and the values she had learned from her parents. These conversations brought a new closeness between the two. Maria began to realize that despite his responsibilities, Victor was a simple and genuine person. He was concerned about the station's future, but also about the well-being of everyone who worked there, something Maria deeply admired. As the relationship between Maria and Victor developed, Maria couldn't help but reflect on Cecilia and Daniel's words. Sometimes during lonely nights, those words would return to her mind like a distant echo. Would honesty really take her far? Or would, as Cecilia always said, the world eventually teach her a different lesson? However, Maria was not willing to give up her principles. She knew that honesty and kindness were not just values to live by, but the essence of who she was. And deep down, she believed that by holding on to these principles, she could make a difference, not just in her own life, but in the lives of those around her. Weeks passed, and Maria began to see the fruits of her labor. The respect of her colleagues was gradually earned through her dedication and the fair way she treated each of them. She made a point of listening to the concerns of the attendants, helping to solve day-to-day problems and ensuring that the station operated efficiently and, above all, honestly. Victor, who closely observed Maria's progress, couldn't have been more satisfied. In his visits, he noticed that the atmosphere at the station was more positive and that the team was starting to work more cohesively. And over time, he and Maria became more than just colleagues. A sincere friendship began to blossom, bringing with it the promise of something more. One day, at the end of the shift, Victor called Maria for a conversation. They sat in the small manager's office, where Maria now spent most of her days. "You're doing a great job," Victor said, looking at her sincerely. "I knew you were the right person for this position." Maria smiled, feeling recognized and somewhat relieved. "Thank you, Victor. It's been a challenge, but also very rewarding." Victor nodded, but there was something more in his gaze, something Maria couldn't quite identify. "Maria, I wanted to tell you that, well, I'm happy to have met you. I think you've brought something good, not just to the station, but also to me." Maria felt her heart race at those words. She knew that their relationship was changing, but she still didn't know how far it could take them. "I'm happy too, Victor. You gave me a chance when I needed it most. I'll never forget that." The silence that followed was loaded with meaning, and both knew that their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't yet predict. As Victor said goodbye that night, Maria was left alone in the office, reflecting on everything that had happened in recent days. Life indeed had curious ways of surprising, and so, with her heart full of hope and determination, Maria continued to walk her path, knowing that no matter what the future brought, she would face everything with the same honesty and kindness that had always guided her. The first weeks as station manager had been challenging, but Maria was determined to make it work. However, the routine soon revealed obstacles she hadn't foreseen. The initial shine of her new position began to fade as problems accumulated, both at work and in her personal life. Cecilia, who had long been the most experienced attendant at the station, began to show clear signs of envy. She had always been cynical and suspicious, but now she seemed to direct all her bitterness towards Maria. Passive-aggressive comments became more frequent, and Cecilia started openly questioning Maria's decisions in front of other employees without any hesitation. "Do you really think this is the best way to handle this, Maria?" Cecilia would ask with a tone of disdain, referring to any small change Maria implemented. "You're still new at this. Maybe you should listen more and talk less." Maria, while trying to remain calm, was beginning to feel the weight of this growing tension. She knew that Cecilia was unhappy, but she didn't understand why her colleague had to act so hostilely. Every day, Cecilia seemed to find a new way to create small conflicts, whether by delaying important tasks, spreading rumors among the attendants, or simply refusing to collaborate productively. On the other hand, there was Daniel. He had been transferred to a new station that Victor was opening, but the transition had been anything but smooth. Daniel had always been proud of his work, and despite his pragmatic stance, the previous station was his territory, his kingdom, where he had full control. Being relocated to a new unit still under construction felt more like a punishment than an opportunity. Daniel began to express his frustration more and more openly. He regularly called Victor, complaining about the difficulties he was facing at the new station, the working conditions, the delays in deliveries, and the lack of an experienced team. Victor, for his part, tried to calm Daniel, assuring him that everything was being done to get the new station up and running as quickly as possible. But the tension between the two was palpable, and Maria knew that somehow this situation also affected the environment where she worked. Maria, caught in the middle of all this, felt torn. On one hand, she felt responsible for maintaining harmony at the station she now managed. She wanted to prove to herself, to Victor, and even to Daniel that she was capable of leading with integrity and effectiveness. On the other hand, the constant provocations from Cecilia and concerns about Daniel made her question whether her beliefs in honesty and kindness were really helping her, or if they were putting her in a vulnerable position. There were moments when Maria, alone in her office, would close her eyes and try to remember her parents' words. Be honest, be kind, because in the end, that's what really matters. But did it really matter? Were these qualities really helping her be a good leader? Or was it, as Cecilia always said, the world eventually teaching her a different lesson? One day, the situation reached a critical point. Cecilia, upset with the decision Maria had made about shift organization, deliberately failed to pass on important information to one of the attendants, resulting in a mistake with an important customer's fuel supply. When Maria discovered what had happened, she knew she could no longer ignore Cecilia's behavior. Maria called Cecilia for a private conversation. "Cecilia, we need to talk about what happened today," Maria began, trying to maintain a calm but firm tone. Cecilia, already prepared for confrontation, crossed her arms and stared at Maria. "Oh, so now you're going to teach me how to do my job? I've been working here longer than you, Maria. Maybe you're the one who needs to learn how to handle things." Maria took a deep breath, trying not to lose her composure. "This isn't about teaching, Cecilia. It's about ensuring everyone works together for the good of the station. I need you to cooperate, to be part of the team, not to create more problems." Cecilia let out a dry laugh. "Part of the team? I am the team, Maria. But maybe you'll only understand that when things really fall apart." The conversation didn't end well. Cecilia left Maria's office with an air of bitter victory, while Maria remained seated, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She knew something needed to be done, but at the same time, she didn't want to resort to drastic measures that would compromise her principles. That same day, Victor showed up at the station as he regularly did. But this time, Maria noticed that he was more tense than usual. "Victor, is everything okay?" she asked, concerned. Victor sighed and nodded, but it was clear that something was bothering him. "It's Daniel. He's having trouble adjusting to the new station. He's frustrated, and it's affecting our professional relationship." Maria felt a pang of guilt. Part of her wondered if accepting the manager's position had contributed to this situation. "I'm sorry, Victor. I didn't mean to cause problems between you two." Victor shook his head. "It's not your fault, Maria. Daniel needs to understand that changes are necessary, but at the same time, I don't want to lose someone as valuable as him." Maria nodded, understanding Victor's dilemma. "Maybe there's a way to help him adjust. Daniel is a good manager. He just needs support in this new challenge." Victor looked at Maria, admiring her empathy even in the face of so many difficulties. "You're different, Maria. Most people would only think about themselves, but you're always concerned about others. That's something rare." Maria smiled, but inside she still wondered whether her kindness was really making a difference, or if it was just making things harder for herself. Nevertheless, she knew she couldn't be any different. Her beliefs, her honesty and kindness were the essence of who she was, and she needed to believe that in the end, these qualities would guide her on the right path. The weeks that followed were filled with intense learning and growth for Maria. Every challenge overcome strengthened her position as the station manager, and her initiatives began to bear fruit. She implemented a more efficient system for organizing shifts, improved communication among the attendants, and developed a new approach to customer service that quickly increased the satisfaction of the drivers who stopped by. Gradually, Maria earned the trust of her colleagues, including those who initially doubted her ability to lead. Even Cecilia, though still reluctant, began to relent when she saw the positive results of the changes implemented. The atmosphere at the station became more collaborative, and respect for Maria grew visibly. Victor, for his part, continued to visit the station regularly. Over time, he and Maria began spending more time together, not just discussing work, but also sharing personal stories and dreams for the future. The friendship between them deepened, and both noticed a special connection that went beyond their professional relationship. However, Maria still felt insecure about what she felt for Victor. She enjoyed his company and admired his qualities, but she feared that a closer relationship could complicate the work environment. Despite these uncertainties, Victor's presence became a constant support for Maria. He was always willing to listen to her concerns and offer advice when necessary. Over time, Maria began to rely more on this bond, though she still tried to maintain a professional distance. One afternoon, the station was operating at its usual pace when a tanker truck arrived to deliver fuel. During the transfer process, an unexpected technical problem caused a gasoline leak. Within seconds, the strong smell of fuel spread throughout the site, and the situation became potentially dangerous. The attendants were alarmed, and chaos began to set in. Customers who were fueling their cars backed away, concerned about the possibility of a fire. However, Maria acted quickly. She immediately shut off the pumps and ordered the attendants to evacuate the area, ensuring that all customers were safely removed. Remaining calm, Maria grabbed a fire extinguisher and went to the site of the leak. With precision, she controlled the flow of gasoline and prevented the situation from getting out of control. Her leadership during the crisis impressed everyone, and soon the situation was under control. Victor, who was at the station at that moment, watched everything with admiration. When everything calmed down, Victor approached Maria, who was still catching her breath. "You were amazing, Maria. Your quick thinking and courage saved the day." Maria smiled, relieved, but still feeling the weight of responsibility. "I just did what needed to be done. I couldn't let something more serious happen." Victor looked into her eyes, his expression showing more than simple admiration. "Maria, you're more than just a good manager. You're someone I can truly trust." These words touched Maria deeply, and she realized that her feelings for Victor were growing in a way she could no longer ignore. However, doubts still lingered in her mind. Could she, in fact, maintain a proper professional relationship with Victor if these feelings continued to develop? As the day ended, Maria realized that in addition to all the challenges she faced at the station, she now had to deal with her own feelings. But one thing was certain: she would continue to face everything with the same strength and integrity that had guided her so far. The atmosphere at the gas station was different that morning. There was a tension in the air that Maria couldn't ignore, a sense that something important was about to happen. She had worked hard in recent weeks, keeping the station running and dealing with the small crises that arose daily. However, a much larger issue was beginning to occupy her thoughts: her feelings for Victor. Victor, for his part, seemed more present than ever. His visits to the station became more frequent, and he always found a reason to talk to Maria, whether to discuss something trivial or simply to spend time with her. Maria noticed the growing connection between them, but didn't know how to handle it. Her fear of mixing work and personal life left her insecure, even as her feelings for Victor became increasingly clear. That afternoon, Victor appeared at the station, but this time he didn't seem interested in discussing work. His expression was serious, and there was a determination in his eyes that Maria couldn't ignore. "Maria, can we talk?" he asked in a tone that left no room for refusal. Maria nodded, and they went to the small manager's office where they could talk more privately. Victor closed the door behind him and turned to her, clearly nervous but determined. "Maria," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through together since you became the manager, and I need to tell you something I can't keep to myself anymore." Maria felt her heart race. She knew what was coming, but that didn't make things easier. "What is it, Victor?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Victor took a step forward, taking Maria's hands in his. "I've fallen in love with you, Maria. I've tried to ignore these feelings, tried to keep things professional, but I can't anymore. I feel a connection with you that I've never felt with anyone before, and I needed you to know that." Maria remained silent for a moment, processing Victor's words. She had always known there was something special between them, but hearing it out loud made it all much more real, and with that reality came all her worries. "Victor, Maria began, but her voice failed her. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "I feel something for you too, something strong, but I'm scared. Scared of how this could affect our work, our professional relationship. I don't want anything to ruin what we've built here." Victor looked at her with deep understanding. "I get it, Maria, and I respect that. But I also believe that if we're honest with each other and with ourselves, we can find a way to make this work. I don't want to lose you, whether as a manager or as someone special in my life." Maria felt tears well up in her eyes. She wanted to believe that they could balance work and personal feelings, but the fear of failure left her paralyzed. "I need some time to think, Victor. This is a lot to process all at once." Victor nodded, gently letting go of Maria's hands. "Of course, Maria. I don't want to pressure you. I just wanted you to know how I feel." Before Maria could respond, the door was abruptly opened. Cecilia entered the room unannounced, her expression a mix of anger and frustration. "Sorry to interrupt," she said in a tone that indicated she wasn't at all sorry for doing so. "But I think it's high time we had a talk, Maria." Victor stepped back, realizing that this was a moment where Maria needed to deal with Cecilia alone. "I'll leave you two to talk," he said, exiting the room and closing the door behind him. Maria turned to Cecilia, feeling the weight of the tension that had formed in the air. "What's going on, Cecilia?" she asked, trying to remain calm. Cecilia crossed her arms, staring at Maria with a defiant expression. "I'm tired of all this, Maria. Tired of watching you take control of the station, as if you were the queen of the place, while I'm here working like a mule without any recognition." Maria was surprised by the intensity of Cecilia's words, but tried to maintain a firm stance. "Cecilia, I never wanted to take anyone's place. I'm just doing my job." "Your job?" Cecilia scoffed. "You think you know everything, don't you? You have no idea what it's like to fight for respect here because you came in with everything handed to you. And now I see you and Victor always together, and I realize I never had a fair chance. I should be where you are, Maria. I deserved that." Maria felt the anger and sadness in Cecilia, but she knew she needed to respond fairly. "Cecilia, I understand that you're frustrated, and I'm sorry you feel that way, but I never wanted to harm you. I'm just trying to do what's best for the station and everyone who works here." Cecilia let out an exasperated sigh. "Maybe you believe that, Maria, but the truth is, I'm tired of being in the shadow of someone who doesn't even understand what it's like to really fight to get somewhere. If Victor likes you, so be it. But I'm not going to accept being treated like a second-class employee anymore." Maria realized that this was a crucial moment. Cecilia was on the verge of exploding, and any poorly calculated response could worsen the situation. "Cecilia," Maria said, trying to use a conciliatory tone, "I want you to know that I respect your work and your dedication. I truly believe you are valuable to this station, and if you feel you're not being recognized as you should, let's talk about it and find a solution. We don't need to be enemies." For a moment, Cecilia seemed to consider Maria's words, but the pain and envy were still too strong for her to accept a truce so easily. "I don't know, Maria. Maybe it's too late for that." Cecilia left the room, leaving Maria alone with her thoughts. The confrontation with Cecilia had been emotionally exhausting, and now Maria found herself in a real dilemma. On one side was Victor and the feelings that were intensifying. On the other was the pressure to maintain a healthy and fair work environment for everyone. Later, when Maria finally had a moment to reflect, she realized that she needed to make a choice. She could no longer ignore her feelings for Victor, but she also couldn't let it interfere with her work. Perhaps the only solution was to balance both with honesty and transparency. That night, Maria decided to give love a chance. She knew the journey ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and complicated decisions, but she was willing to try. Maria was determined to believe in the love that was beginning to blossom between her and Victor. After everything they had been through together, she knew it was time to set her fears aside and give a chance to what could be a beautiful relationship. However, before moving forward, there were still some pending issues that needed to be resolved. That afternoon, Victor showed up at the station with a serious expression, asking to speak privately with Maria. They went to the small manager's office, where Victor closed the door and began to speak. "Maria, there's something you need to know," he said in a grave tone. "I found out that Daniel is having an affair with Cecilia. That explains part of her behavior over the past few months. I believe this situation is affecting not only the station's morale, but also the work dynamics." Maria was surprised, but at the same time, many things began to make sense. Cecilia had always been a difficult person, but her recent attitude had been beyond normal. "This changes a lot," Maria said thoughtfully. "We need to resolve this in a way that doesn't hurt anyone more than it already has." Victor agreed. "I think the best solution would be to transfer Cecilia to the station where Daniel is now. That way, they can resolve things between themselves away from here, and we can restore harmony at the station." Maria nodded. The decision seemed sensible. "Let's talk to Cecilia and see how she reacts." Shortly after, Maria called Cecilia for a conversation. She and Victor explained that they were aware of her relationship with Daniel and that they believed a transfer would be the best solution for everyone. To Maria's surprise, Cecilia didn't react with anger or denial. Instead, she seemed relieved. "You're right," Cecilia said with a sigh. "This situation is destroying me inside, and I think distancing myself from here is the best for me and everyone else. I want to apologize for everything I did, Maria. I was letting my personal problems affect my work and taking it out on you. I'm sorry for that." Maria accepted Cecilia's apology, recognizing the sincerity in her words. "I understand, Cecilia, and thank you for acknowledging that. I hope this change helps you and Daniel resolve things." Cecilia thanked them both for their understanding and said her goodbyes, preparing for the transfer. The atmosphere at the station already felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. That same evening, Maria and Victor went out together, finally free from the tensions that had hung over them in recent weeks. They went to a quiet park where the soft lights created a perfect setting for the conversation they needed to have. Sitting on a bench, Victor turned to Maria, holding her hands. "I'm glad we've resolved everything, Maria, and even happier that we can finally focus on us." Maria smiled, feeling the peace that came with resolving problems and with the decision she had made. "Me too, Victor. I think now we can start over without fear." Victor leaned in, and under the soft light of the park, gave Maria their first kiss. It was a kiss full of tenderness and promises, marking the beginning of a new phase for both of them. As they walked back side by side, Maria knew she had made the right choice. With Victor by her side, she was ready to face any challenge, knowing that together they could build something beautiful and lasting. Months had passed quickly since Maria and Victor took the first step into their new life together. What started with uncertainties and challenges gradually transformed into a routine of love and companionship. Now living in Victor's family mansion, where Victor's father, Richard, also resided, Maria felt that she had finally found where she belonged. The sun shone softly through the mansion's windows, illuminating the vast garden where Max joyfully chased after a butterfly. Maria watched the scene with a serene smile, feeling completely at peace. Much had changed since that day when she desolately returned home after being fired from the gas station. Now it all seemed like a distant, almost unbelievable dream. She and Victor had been living together for a few months, and the mansion where they lived, the old family home of Victor, had become a true home. Richard, Victor's father, also lived with them. With the progression of his disease, Alzheimer's, he needed constant care, but Maria and Victor had found a balance that made life harmonious for everyone. Despite his memory lapses, Richard still had moments of lucidity and joy, especially when he was with Maria and Max, whom he adored. Maria stroked her belly, where the baby she and Victor were expecting was beginning to show the first signs of life. Being pregnant was a magical feeling that only intensified the sense of fulfillment she had found in recent months. Sitting on the porch, she reflected on the entire journey that had brought her here. She remembered, when she was still working at the station, how every decision and every challenge had seemed so big at the time. She thought about how her honesty and kindness, values she had never abandoned, had guided her even in the most difficult moments. Now, as she looked toward the future, Maria felt accomplished, not only in her professional life, but also personally. She had found in Victor a partner who not only supported her, but shared the same dreams and values. Victor appeared on the porch, smiling as he saw Maria lost in thought. He approached and placed his hand on her belly, feeling the baby's slight movements. "Are you thinking about the future?" he asked softly. Maria nodded, looking at him with love. "Yes, but also about the past. About how everything changed for the better since we met. I never imagined my life would take this turn, but I'm so grateful for everything." Victor sat beside her, gently pulling her closer. "I'm grateful too, Maria. You've brought light into my life, and now we're building something beautiful together." The two sat in silence for a few moments, simply enjoying each other's presence and the gentle sound of the wind passing through the garden. Max, tired of chasing the butterfly, returned to the porch and lay down at Maria's feet, as if he too wanted to be part of that moment of peace. Maria looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky with orange and pink. "The future may have its challenges, but I'm ready to face them as long as you're by my side." Victor smiled, kissing Maria's forehead. "I'll always be. We're going to create an amazing life, full of love and happiness for us and for our child." And so, with their hearts full of hope and love, Maria and Victor prepared to start a new phase of their lives, ready to face whatever the future held for them. Together, they knew they could overcome any obstacle, building a family and a life that would forever be a testament to the power of love, honesty, and kindness. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you